Everybody, it's good to be playing again, and thanks to Sligo County Library and Michelle Brennan and all involved for asking me to play at this event celebrating the work of Mike McCormack. Great to be here, and I'm going to start off with a. Sometimes at a gig you might say I'll start off with a song that everybody knows, but sometimes I'll start off with a song that I know, but that sort of way. Anyway, there's a wee song by probably one of John Martin's most famous songs, a wee song called Me You Never. Hope you enjoy this.
That big song, brother of mine, I know that your love is true, and you ain't talking dirty behind my back, though I know that the song will do. Oh please, won't you bear it in mind? Love is a lesson to learn in our time. Please, won't you bear it in mind for me? May you never lay your head down without a hand to hold. May you never make your bed out in the cold. May you never lose your temper if you get it in a barroom fight. May you never lose your love.
Okay, Seamie.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. Hello and welcome to Sligo Library's The Word, November's edition of The Word with award-winning novelist Mike McCormack. We just had music there with Seamie O'Dowd, and he'll be providing further music throughout the evening. We'll also have our open mic, and we'll have Mike McCormack will be in conversation with IT Sligo's Alice Lyons as well. I'd just like to ask you at this stage if you could keep your profile in mute, and if you have any questions or comments, you can put them into the chat option in Zoom. And if you're taking part in the open mic, could you get ready to unmute yourself towards the end of the open Q&A. And also, this is our final edition of The Word for the year, but if you want to watch back on previous editions, you can go to Sligo Library, our own YouTube channel, and all editions are available there to watch back. So I'm just going to hand you over to Alice Lyons, and she's going to take the evening from here. Thanks, Alice.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everybody. Welcome to everybody here to a night that I'm really excited about. Two really remarkable Irish artists paired tonight, and I think it's an inspired pairing with Mike McCormack here, who I'm really happy to welcome to Sligo virtually, and Seamie O'Dowd. Both, I think, artists who are very much rooted in the places that they come from here in the west of Ireland. And they draw so much from the landscape here, the communities, the language, the traditions, of course, and yet their impact has been international. And so, yeah, it's an honor to be here with them tonight. And I don't think that impact has gone to their heads anyway. It seems so. So just a little bit about Mike. I'm sure many of you, I know many of my students here tonight are familiar with Mike's work because we've read one of his books, Solar Bones, just recently. But Mike is from Louisburg in Mayo, and he's the author of two collections of short stories, Getting It in the Head, which was published in 1995, and Forensic Songs from not too long ago, 2012, 9 years ago. And then three novels, Crowe's Requiem, 1998, Notes from a Coma, which was published in 2005, and Solar Bones from 2015. For his work, Mike has been awarded the Rooney Prize for Irish Literature, Goldsmiths Prize, the Irish Book Award Novel of the Year, and the Dublin International Literary Award, also or formerly known as the IMPAC Award. Mike lives in Galway, and he teaches at NUI Galway. He teaches writing there. So Mike, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Alice. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
Mike, I wanted to ask you first, because it strikes me that you, maybe more than many writers that I can think of, would have had a kind of nervousness, or maybe a sense of an impending kind of, well, I think about Marcus Conway, who says that an engineer's thoughts are never very far from collapse. And I was just wondering how the pandemic and, all that has come from it in the last couple of years, how it has been for you. How have you fared thus far with it?
Yeah, good question. When I was when it started first, I think like everyone else, I thought it would be a matter of a few weeks, and we would batten down the hatches for a few weeks, and we'd be locked into our houses, and after a few weeks then we'd be able to poke our heads up from under the ground and watch it fly away off into the distance and that. We know now that didn't happen, and what I found happening with myself was I think like a lot of other people, I made the mistake of thinking that, oh, brilliant, I'll be at home, I'll be able to get loads of work done. I'll be close to my tools. I won't have to go out and meet people, and it's exactly what I wanted. My work will be near me, but I won't have to commute. But what I found was that it brought with it a kind of a fatigue, which was completely unpredictable. And it was a unique type of fatigue. It was low grade and so constant, and it was a low grade anxiety. The best way I can put it is that it's like your soul had a slow puncture. You're barely sensible, but over the long run, it really took a toll on you in that. And that was one of the things that I experienced. And the other thing was that, curiously enough, I found that there's no better man to live on his own and to live inside his own head than myself. And I wouldn't have thought that I would have missed the company of other people and going out and socializing as much as I did. But I think there's a distinction to be made there, because I think what I like living in a world where those things are possible. I don't have to avail of them, but they have to be possible. And it's when they're not possible, that's what aggrieves me. One or two people, I was explaining this notion about how I didn't get as much work done as I thought I'd get done, and I didn't get as much, I wasn't as energetic as I thought I would be. And someone clarified this for me, and he said, so many people made the mistake of thinking that this was a holiday at the beginning. He says, it's not a holiday, it's a crisis. Where did we ever get the notion that this was going to be easy? So in the last the first lockdown was brilliant. I had a great time. I spent a lot of time with my little boy, and that it was a good time to be a dad, out walking about, and I discovered a whole new forest that's just within 100 yards of the house. You wouldn't believe that I'd missed a forest. I'd been living in this place for about 12 years, and there was this forest I didn't know of about 100 yards away, but that's what happened. So we discovered that together, and that was a big plus. That was our go-to place. But as for getting work done, I didn't get as much as I thought I would get done. I don't think I'm unique in that. I've heard a lot of writers talking about that they didn't find it, as made the mistake of thinking that it would be, oh, this would be great, I'll be able to get work done, but that didn't quite happen.
Yeah. I love that image of a slow puncture in one's soul. That's just perfect. I completely identify with that as well. I wanted to ask you about, I'm so struck in kind of reading through a lot of your work, again, recently, of how much your connection to the community that you came from, West Mayo, infuses so much of what you write. And I kept thinking, because of other things that I'm reading or teaching, I kept crossing over to Seamus Heaney, actually. And the way that Heaney goes back to Balahi again and again, it's like this an overplayed metaphor with him, but it is a well that he really draws from throughout his whole life in whatever else he's turning his attention to. And it seems to me that that's something that you do as well, even though I think very originally for someone in Ireland, you are also so concerned with forces of globalization, with technology and its impact on us. I think that image that strikes me so beautifully in Solar Bones of the father whose newly purchased tractor is not able to be started because of this satellite that doesn't blip the correct blips to home base. But that is such a beautiful image for what is happening in that book and so many of your other books as well, and stories. Can you talk a little bit about that? How West Mayo works for you?
Yeah, and you're right. Heaney referred to it as a well, but I refer to it as this is my generative ground. This is the solid ground out of which my work grows, and I always see a lot of my work as speculative, and ergo, if it's speculative, it means that some of it is wrong. But you can only speculate from something you know, and the one thing I do know these parts of the west of Ireland. I know their moods, I know their rhythms and rituals, and I know their habits, as Marcus leans on in Solar Bones. So that's very important to me, and I didn't set out to be kind of a spokesman for the west of Ireland and that, or a spokesman for rural Ireland or Mayo or something. But there's just that pull in the steering of my pen. Every time I put my pen to paper, it'll veer off towards West Mayo, towards North Mayo, where my mum is from, up in Dahoma, and to South Mayo, where my dad is from and where I lived for many years in that. And it's proved fruitful, and as long as it's proven fruitful, I will return to it in that. But you're very right in that I don't see the west of Ireland as I don't think it's a naive place. I don't think it's a backward place. I think it is a place in which the future is being minted in no less a place than in urban areas and that. And the west of Ireland actually has a history of inventing the future. We seem to forget that the first transatlantic flight touched down in the west of Ireland. The first transatlantic communication, came out of Clifton and that. So we've been on the cutting edge of several, very big and influential innovations. And as a place, it's something I know about. So once I start writing about it, anything can happen. And because my work is speculative, there's no reins on it, and I'm as comfortable talking about cyborgs and technology and everything. The most recent thing I published was a story that was broadcast on RTE radio, and it's a story about in 5 or 6 years ago, an android was made a citizen of Saudi Arabia, and she gave an interview. She was made a full citizen of Saudi Arabia, and because I have a long-running interest in the transhuman and that, and post-human condition and that, I was just fascinated by this. And in my story, it's 25 years later on from that, and she now lives in Louisburg in County Mayo, and she works in insurance, and she's trying to make a life for herself. She has renounced her citizenship of Saudi Arabia in solidarity with the predicament of women in Saudi Arabia, and she has moved to a place in the world where she can be. And I don't find any difficulty with that. I have no cognitive, imaginative, or philosophical difficulty with that. So I see it as a place of great innovation. I've always seen rural Ireland as a place of great innovation, great imagination, and one of the things I've seen is a place where decent people live decent lives, where people are neighbourly and won't see you stuck. If there's one thing I tried to redress in my work, it's this notion that rural Ireland is full of stupid people hitting each other over the head with shovels and that, or splitting each other's skulls with loys. If there was one idea I wanted to write against, it would be that. My own concept of rural Ireland is a place where smart, decent people go about living decent lives, and they won't see you stuck. And I thought that was a pretty radical idea, actually. So those are the things. The other is the landscape. I think the Mayo of Solar Bones is the Mayo of Solar Bones is it's almost an apocalyptic place. It's a place where hermits come. It's a place where people go on hunger strike, and Mayo has this kind of end of times thing going on in it. Like I didn't make any of those things up. There was a nun, and she had her own hermitage, and she could have chosen the whole world to go to it, but she didn't. She chose Mayo. Mayo has a history of political protest, of men going on hunger strike. I didn't make that up. That's there in history. 3 men in peacetime have given their lives on hunger strike for the Republican cause. There's no other county in Ireland that's done that. And there's this thing in Mayo as well. We have these penitential shrines. More than any other county in Ireland, we have these we have Knock, and we have Crowe Patrick, and we have the Prayer House in Achill. Why do we have those in Mayo? I don't know. So those are the things that call me back to. Those are the things that bring me back to Mayo, and it's the well I keep drawing from, or as I prefer to say, it's my generative ground. It's the ground out of which I write.
Generative ground is, yeah, perfect expression there. Yeah, I love that word decent, Mike, because I think that is such a powerful force in so many of your books. Solar Bones being, the most recent one, but in Notes from a Coma as well, that sense of decency in the community as they try to make sense of what's happening to this.
I'm glad you drew down. I'm glad you drew down that in Notes from a Coma, because it's a central idea in the book of neighborly decency and human decency and everything. That's it's a core idea in that book, I think.
Yeah, and I think in many of your books, in many of your works, and I think you mentioned it there about the kind of the activism on the ground in Mayo, and I'm interested too in how so many of your works there is either a political activist like Mark in I the Flock who dies, and yet his avatars continue to do activist work on climate change, and of course there's Agnes who puts her body on the line as an instrument of kind of intervention, artistic intervention. Can you talk a little bit about that interest? It's like social justice, activism, and art, all wrapped up into something.
God, I didn't think I'd be talking about I the Flock of all things. That's what they were. I'm surprised myself at a couple of the themes I write about, and a couple of themes are notorious for making writers look foolish. One of them is the soul. One of them is the soul. You'll always come away battered off it. You'll never. And the other is politics. You always come off second best in that one. But these are two things that my books return to again and again, almost against my own will, in fact. But what seems to interest me, or what seems to interest my books, isn't the great political narratives. It's not the narratives of capitalism or communism or socialism. What politically interests my book is the individual as a citizen, the individual as a political integer, a political monad. They're political right from the beginning. The moment that the moment, for instance, that Marcus Conway's child is given the birth certificate and a social security number, and this is how I know Marcus isn't me. He has a really benign view of this. He sees her being freed and enabled into society. He sees so many rights accruing to her. He properly sees so many rights accruing to her. And she is freed into a democracy. She's freed into a liberal democracy. She's free to get library cards, medical cards. And then she grows up herself, and she's kind of skeptical about an awful lot of things that being freed into this democracy entitles her to. But it's because one of the things, and not for one moment does he ever see it as the state keeping tabs on us, or the state keeping us organized and surveilled, which I would think is what it does. He doesn't see that. He sees it as an unalloyed good thing. She's a citizen. And that's what my books politically seem to lean on, is what is it, in a political thing, what is it to be a citizen? What rights accrue to you, and what responsibilities are you responsible for? And these seem to be the thing. Now, I'm really surprised that about the lad who in the central character at the heart of I the Flock, I think he's the most kind of radical social justice warrior I've ever minted in that. And I think it's because I heard someone use the phrase ethical hacker. I'd never heard the phrase ethical hacker until 5 or 6 years ago. I said, what? That's a great paradox. That's so that dwelt in my head in that, and one of the lessons I learned from writing Notes from a Coma is that when you're dead, your body and all your biological rhythms, they come to an end. That's it. But your reputation and your character lives on after you in that, and that seems to be what has taken. It seems to become embodied in these avatars, these very willful avatars who are still going about his work and that. But I think, to go back, I think citizenship is my theme. It's not citizenship, the individual person, man or woman, as a political integer. That seems to be what my books are about, and that, not the grand narratives. I can't ever see myself writing a critique of liberal democracy or something like that. But I would probably I'd be interested in seeing more about how citizenship flowers or curdles or wilts in liberal democracy.
And there's always that sense of the citizen against something larger. There's this sense of scale, always, I think, in your books.
I think so. Yeah, scale is hugely important in scale is hugely important in Solar Bones. It's kind of an philosophical and an aesthetic reach in it and everything, and I've always said that the book is about it's a book to span heaven and earth, or it's a song. I've always thought of it as a song to span heaven and earth, and that it's about stars and it's about sandwiches, and that's the scale of it. And incidentally, the thing that you talked about there about the tractor and the tractor and the satellite and that, that's a journey that has taken place in my lifetime. My uncle, back in the 1970s, up in North Mayo, when he was in his early 20s, I used to follow him out into the field with a horse, and he had a plough and a harrow and a scuffler, and these machines were medieval machines. They hadn't evolved much beyond the high point in the 14th and 15th century. And in his lifetime, he went from those machines to having a tractor with GPS on it. Now, what about that for a leap? That's,
Scale.
Yeah, scale, history, all compacted into less than a lifetime, about 40 years of that. He went from those medieval machines to a digital world. It's an incredible leap, and I think it must leave us kind of startled in some way or other in that.
I can't let go something you mentioned, because it's so interesting to me, and I'm really glad you mentioned just the word soul, in terms of that in politics being a very something that gets writers trashed all the time, but it's really hard to not talk about in terms of Marcus Conway especially, although I think, again, Notes from a Coma, I think there's something about if not the soul of that character JJ, certainly his consciousness and his conscientiousness about his existence. But that sense of it happening on All Souls Day, on the day when the worlds are supposed to thin a little bit, and the dead are closer to us, and he comes back to his house. Can you talk a little bit more about your relationship to that idea, and maybe even the difficulty of tangling with it in a way that isn't hackneyed or simple?
The idea came to me from it was a piece of folklore that I know from North Mayo, where my mum is from, that All Souls Day, that the dead return, and they used to leave out pieces of food for them and that, so that they were welcomed in that. It's very different in Galway. In Galway they have a very different telling, where they try to disguise themselves in the house because they don't want the dead to come back, because the dead have come a long way and they could eat you out of house and home and that. But in North Mayo they had a different kind of a read on it. They would welcome them back and that, and I liked that idea. I liked that. Really liked that kind of that welcoming twist on that story and that. And you know, I'm an altar boy, and I was steeped in the Catholic calendar and Catholic ritual, and so the idea of a soul is something that I've grown up with since ever I opened my first catechism and read it, and I could no more let it go. I could no more forfeit that idea than I could forfeit the idea of the fact that I'm left-handed or something like that. Just it's just kind of bred in the bone. And yeah, I try to write about it as you try and bring something novel to the idea and that. But it is, and I don't know to what degree. It's not for me to say that I've tried to say something new and different on it, and that it's for others to say to what degree I have achieved it or not. But it's an idea that I am in good faith about, and that I sincerely believe in. I do believe that there's this divine element within us, whether it's and I'm not sure whether it's given to us from on high, or whether it is something that we achieve as an overall over-emergent quality in ourselves or something like that. I really don't know. But I do believe that, and I do believe it's underwrote in heaven. I do believe it's underwrote in some sort of supreme being. So, and that's all. You know, I'd love to be more subtle about these things, but it's something that comes down from my childhood, and it's no more than many another thing. When I started writing in my early 20s, my Catholic upbringing came rushing back to me, and it inflected everything I've done. It's very insistent in my first book of short stories and that, and I welcomed it back. I saw it as a positive reservoir of myth and story and teachings and lore, and the world was wider on account of it. You know, the world extended from earth up to heaven on account of it and that. So I'm grateful for it, as I say, it's a strange thing to say. It's a strange thing to say, and it's strange to be saying it's a strange thing, but I never met anything but good priests in my life either as well, so that's something that kind of startles me as well. Sounds odd in this day and age almost on that, but it happens to be the truth. They were all good men. I was taught by one man who was a bollocks, but as an altar boy, I never met anything but good priests. So I've good memories of it and that. And it's not just a sentimental attachment, although it is an element of that. It's an intellectual and spiritual attachment to it as well. We shouldn't be afraid of these words. I think we are. We're abashed, and there are words that don't come easy to us anymore. Think words like soul, maybe even the word decent doesn't come easy to us anymore. We think that it's antique and of another era, but I don't know. I have great faith in them. They seem to me to be there with good They seem to be there with good reason and as good reason. So I'll stick with them for a while yet, I think.
Yeah, decent souls, an even better expression.
Decent souls. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
I'm aware, I think, Mike, I could just chat with you for ages, so thank you so much. But I think that there's questions from the audience that we may want to take up. Is that right? Are we at the time for the Q&A?
Well, we haven't had Mike read for us yet. Would Mike like to read
Oh
something
my,
for us before
oh
we
my
do the
goodness,
Q&A?
I'm so
I know
sorry.
you can start
Of
the
course, sorry,
I
conversation
don't.
there. Didn't interrupt.
excuse me,
I,
Mike.
I, don't-
I'm
I would
getting ahead
prefer
of us.
to, if there's any questions there, I'd prefer to do the questions and that, because I
Do
think
you want to do that
the
first,
people,
and then you can read for us after, maybe, if that's okay?
yeah, like let's go
Yeah.
with it. Let's go with questions and see what they're saying,
Okay.
because
Okay. I have a
I'm
question. I have a
yeah.
question from Maeve McCormack. She says, I love the way you talk about Mayo landscape as if it's a person, and the way you talk about your books almost as people. You say the book Wanted. Can you talk about your writing process and discovering your stories in starting completing a book? And this question comes in from Maeve McCormack, no relation.
No, I don't
She
have
takes.
any. I don't have any Maeve McCormacks. Yeah, one of the things that I sit down, I write long-handed. I write pen and paper is my go-to starting point, and that it's one of the joys of being a writer is that pen and paper, you're ready to rock. My first consideration is with pen and paper, and I just turn up at the desk every day, and I work from mainly, you know, I work from visual images, and the images I have in my head are always visual images, and then a voice will come to me, and that. I turn up every day. I do it, and the one thing I'll say about compositional wise about the shape of my books and the structure of them, and that, because and again, it was only it shows you how clueless you can be about your own work, is that I didn't realize how antithetical or how contradictory the Solar Bones is to Notes from a Coma. Solar Bones is a continuous riverine single piece, and Notes from a Coma is exactly what it says on the tin. It's notes. It's very fragmented and bitty in that. Now, in order to arrive at those shapes and structures in that, the one thing I will say is that I keep asking the book, show me the shape you want to be. If you could birth yourself, what shape would you take? That's what I want to know. I don't want to impose a shape on you. I would prefer not to be writing it at all. And I would prefer if the book could birth itself without any intervention from me. But so far, we haven't had that. We haven't perfected that agreement between myself and any book. But I keep asking it, show me the shape you want to be. Show me the structure you want to be. And I will give it that shape and structure. And that's what I try to do, is to attune myself to the shape and structure that the book wants to be. And I turn up every day and I rewrite. I used to write to about 7 drafts, and earlier on, I now write to about 5 drafts, I'd say. I tend to work upwards from short drafts. My first draft will probably be about 60% of what it finishes up to be. It'll be 60%, 80%, 90%, 100%, and then it'll go 105%, and then I'll have to take out the power hose and hose back 5% of it, and that's when it's done. So I work to about 5 drafts at the moment. That's what I do. It takes me a long time. I'm a slow writer. But that's how it goes. I hope that answers it for Maeve McCormack.
Yeah, she says that's a lovely idea, asking the book. So she says thank you. The next question is from Keith Hopper. He says it's a lovely interview so far. Kevin Barry talks about the Sligo occult in relation to Dermot Healy's work. Is there a Mayo occult, and is this a useful concept?
There might be a Mayo occult. There's a Mayo strange. There's a Mayo Gothic. There is. If you just there's a Mayo end of times. If you just give yourself, just think about the things that Mayo has those end of time things, and the landscape is a big part of it as well. It's not just the landscape; it's the landscapes of Mayo are a big part of it. It has several moods, and it's very far flung. And I was always conscious of it as a child because I used to drive the length and breadth of it. It was a pain in the ass as a child because I was always getting sick in the car. But looking back now, I'm really looking back now. I'm very thankful for the sense of scale that it gave me as a child, driving from Louisburg up through Westport and north of Newport and out into the Badlands of Ballycroy, out into the terra incognita of Ballycroy. And Ballycroy was absolutely massive then. It's smaller now because it's conifers. It's all conifers, and those oaks, they crowd in around you. But when I was a child, it was blanket bog, and it stretched off into the distance. So that's one of the things, and as I say, like, you know, you have to look up people like Nangle in Achill, the preacher in Achill, and see the kind of things he got up to in the 19th century. Look at look at the work of that mystic in the prayer house in Achill. Her name will come to me again. You know, I think maybe a Mayo hysterics or a Mayo penance might be closer to it than a Mayo Gothic or a Mayo strain or a Mayo occult, I think. But it's definitely an augmented realism that I go for. It's definitely an augmented realism that I go for. Yeah.
And person here, Mario, wants to ask, can I ask you about finding your voice as a writer? And this is from Marion, a first-year student.
Yeah. When I was a first-year student, like Marion, I was lucky in that my reading was my own and wasn't dictated to by anyone. And I had read people like John McGahern, and I'd read people like J.G. Ballard and Philip K. Dick and Thomas Pynchon. And I loved John McGahern because I saw a big lump of my own life laid down in it. But then again, I was reading people like Philip K. Dick and Thomas Pynchon and J.G. Ballard, and I loved what they were doing as well. So very, very, very early in my life, I conceived of myself as if all these fellas came together at a crossroads and conceived a bastard love child, that I would be that writer. I would be the writer who could draw together all these influences. I would be the offspring of McGahern and Philip K. Dick and Thomas Pynchon all rolled into one, writing out Mayo. That was the shapes. I suppose that was the kind of shapes that I threw in my head. You know, if you're going to be throwing shapes as a writer in your early 20s, that was the pose, I suppose, I struck in my own head and imagination in my early 20s. And the job then was to fill it out. The job then was to go and do the work on that. And I was very lucky in my early 20s. I put together a reader of my favorite short stories, and I read those in depth. And those short stories, there's 2 stories by Saki in it. There was a heap of stories by J.G. Ballard. There was Guest of the Nation. There was a brilliant story that we learned in our Intercert anthology by H.G. Wells called The Diamond Maker. And on it went, and gradually through an accrual of all reading and going back over these things, my own voice emerged in that. But again, it was, I wanted, again, it's that I loved what McGahern had done, but there wasn't enough of my life in McGahern. There wasn't his, you know, I didn't see my preoccupation with, I didn't see my preoccupation with rock music in it. I didn't see my preoccupation with heavy metal. I didn't see my preoccupation with science fiction in it. So I went out of the way to draw all of those things in, and that's really how I came upon my voice.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. We have another question from Kate Dowling. You mentioned wishing the book would birth itself. This resonates with me. Does this ever give you writer's block, and how do you battle it?
I think I have writer's block every day. I just, you turn up at the desk. I wish I had more. I wish I had more enabling advice than that. You turn up at the desk. I used to do part of what informed Solar Bones was an experiment that I did for about 2 or 3 years. Was I would turn up at the desk and write anything that came into my head for 10 or 15 minutes, and the only thing it had to do I was interested in the rhythm and the continuity of it and that. And the only law that governed it was it had to transition smoothly from whatever it was that wherever I'd finished from. It either could continue what I was writing yesterday, or it had to continue, or it had to transition smoothly from it. And there would be no full stop. I just had to keep following it. So that was it. That was an experiment that I did. That was an experiment that I did, I don't know, about 10 or 12 years ago. And Marcus Conway, when he visited me and turned up, he reminded me of it. He says, you have this experiment from over 10 years ago. You should have a look at it. You might find it handy. So I did, and it was him reminding me of something. So that's what I do. I turn up at the desk, and as I say, for a period of my life, I used to write anything that came into my head. And to this day, I think I have a manuscript of about 350 pages, and it's nonsense, but it's continuous rhythmic nonsense, riverine nonsense. I don't know what sort of a manuscript it actually is. I'd be afraid to go back into it, but I have a feeling that there would be a kind of a heartbeat in it. It would be possibly was what I was looking for. Some sort of systolic rhythm would be what I was looking for.
Brilliant. I have a question here from Alice. Is writing peaceful for you? That's from Alice Turton.
No, it's a bit of a trudge, and it's a bit of a trudge, and it's writers have a vested interest in telling you that this is difficult, and that it is, and I find it, I do find it difficult. It doesn't. My writing has to journey a long way from its first consideration to its polished outcome, and that my first touch isn't good, so I have to rewrite a lot, and rewriting takes up, I don't know, I rewrite about 80% of the time is what I'm doing. Writing only takes up 20% of the time. Rewriting what I've done takes up on the other 80% of it, and that. But sometimes there's a thrill to be had in writing is an act of discovery. It's an adventure, and sometimes there are really gladdening adventures to be had out there in writing. So sometimes, yeah, it is. I've had moments when I've enjoyed thinking, yeah, geez, that was fun. That was something I didn't know about the world, and only that I started to write about it, I wouldn't have unearthed it or anything. Yeah.
From Diane, lovely listening to you. She has two questions. What book do you wish you had written, and what piece of advice would you offer students? I think you've given us a lot of advice this evening now, but if you have anything else to offer, thank you.
I'm going to quote a writer from Sligo, because I asked him the very same question in an interview. I interviewed Dermot Healy.
Wow.
It's quite a while ago now, but I asked him that very same question, and he didn't have to think very hard, and he said, don't censor the self, just go for it, don't censor the self. And that's what I would say. I said, put a work ethic in place, turn up at the desk, and don't censor the self. Don't start second guessing yourself or your audience or anyone like that. Just go for it. The other part of the question is, to put it another way, or to answer it another way, what's the best novel I've read in recent years, and that. And I'm happy to give the same. I've been given the same answer, I think, now for the last 3 years to that question, and it's a book by a French writer called Mélis de Carangal, and it's called Men the Living. Be of interest to Sligo people, because it begins with an absolutely brilliant chapter on surfing, and it's a story about a 19-year-old surfer. It's a story of a 19-year-old surfer who dies in an accident, and who's in an irreversible coma in an accident, and his mother takes the decision to turn his machine off and to donate his organs, and his heart goes on a journey across France. I'm not giving anything away. This is all on the back of the book, and the book follows the journey of the heart out of his chest to its final resting place. Again, I'm not giving anything away. That's the back of the book, and that book is, you'll know something more about what it is to be human. You'll know something more about grief. You'll know something more about generosity after reading that book. It's just brilliant. It's a hymn to many of the good things in life. grief, mothering, surfing. It's worth brilliant opening paragraph on a brilliant opening chapter on a young man in the full of his health surfing a wave off northwest France. It's worth it for that alone. It's a brilliant book. It's called Men the Living by Mélis de Carangal.
I was just going to ask you, could you repeat that again? Men the Living, M-E-N, is it? Or
Mend,
M-E-N-D?
M-E-N-D, Men's the Living.
Okay.
And
I'll
it's
look for that now.
by Mélis, M-A-Y-L-I-S-S-D-E, Carangal, K-E-R-A-N-G-A-L, I think it is. It's Mélis de Carangal.
Great, thanks a million. Another question here from John Homewood. Did committing to writing as a profession ever feel like a risk, or was it an easy commitment to make?
I was doing work on, I was writing a thesis in philosophy, and I was writing it on Martin Heidegger on the philosophy of technology. And I remember I started writing my first fictions during that time, and it was very clear to me very quickly that I was much better at writing fiction than I was at writing philosophy. And I thought, I could do this. You could make a life out of this. I can remember the day in the morning, that kind of Pauline moment, the sun shining on me, and that was a nice moment. I suppose seeing it wasn't a burning bush moment or something, but it was definitely a moment when something kind of clicked gently in my head. And that, and did I know it was going to be a risk? Absolutely. I was never innocent about these things. I always knew that it was going to be a risk, and that it was going to be full of disappointments, upheavals, things moving sideways, your wheels spinning, the whole thing. You'll never go short of frustrations and disappointments as a writer, and I knew that. I'd read enough about writers and their lives to know that. The Ellmann's biography of James Joyce was very present in my mind in my early 20s, and that I'd read a biography of Edgar Allan Poe. Both of those lads' lives is no advertisement for being a writer in that. So I was well schooled in it and that. So yeah, I did. I knew it was a difficult proposition. But in your 20s, like you don't give a damn. You've only your four bones to look after. It's a different proposition when you get into your 40s, and I didn't draw a proper wage until I was 51, 52. It's a very different proposition in your 40s and 50s. When your whole accommodation, your health starts becoming an issue. You're looking down the barrel of a free bus pass and that kind of thing. It's much more worrying. Yeah, but in your 20s, it isn't, nor should it be. Go for it. You should be reckless. Go for it, bald-headed.
I think you should do it in your 40s too, actually, even despite the risk. Megan Sharp, one last question, and then we'd like you to read, if that's okay, because I'd love to hear more of your Mayo voice. My father's from Mayo, so just hearing you talk about the Mayo religion, I know it well in my house anyways. And so I'll just ask this other question anyways. It's from Megan Sharp, and it's chaos and structure are very intertwined in Solar Bones. Which was easier to write, the chaotic parts or the structured parts?
Can you repeat that again? It's just a bit blurred at the beginning.
Chaos and structure are very intertwined in Solar Bones. Which was easier to write, the chaotic parts or the structured parts?
She's right. Your commentator is right, but they were never separate. They were always. I could no more split them apart in my head now than I could hand you a one-sided coin. They were braided up together, and I would think that probably the book actually has a structure. People don't. The book actually, I've always envisioned it in my head as riverine, late stage riverine, where it wends around and around a landscape, and it almost turns back on itself, but not quite. But it is directional, and it goes from, it's only an hour long, which I think is, it's only an hour long, and it's bookended between two temporal markers, the temporal marker of the 1 o'clock news and the divine marker of the divine marker of the Angelus bell, and within those two things, it was chaos and structure are pretty closely aligned. But you're very right to draw them together, because I write short stories, and I'm always conscious that my short stories seem to me to be full of chaos, kind of tightly bound within the structures of the short story form, and that's what I would see both of those things as kind of at war within tight structures within my work. Yeah.
That's it. That's our final question. So, Mike, I'd like to invite you to read for us now. And thank you so much this evening. You've been so generous with your answers, and it's been just brilliant listening to you and fascinating. And I hope everybody this evening got to appreciate what you've talked to us about this evening. It's just been brilliant. And thank you, Alice, as well, for the enlightening conversation. And just to say, oh yeah, we're going to have a reading now, and then we're going to have some music with Seamus. So we'll have the open mic after that. So if you're reading for the open mic, just get ready to unmute yourself. So Mike McCormack, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I'm just going to read it for about 2 or 3 minutes on that. And I'm going to read, this is the book, this is the page of the book that associates itself with the title, Solar Bones. I'm sometimes asked what the title of the book means, and basically it means it's about Marcus as an engineer having an interest in how things stand up as opposed to collapse, and he's talking here about the community, and he sees that rhythm and ritual and predictability and customs of a small village hold it together, and they're temporal things, and so he sees them, and of course everything temporal in our world is aligned to the sun, so he sees it as this sunlit skeleton holding up the world, and that, and this is kind of a tribute to my own town, Louisburg, where I live outside Louisburg, and if I stand at the kitchen window with my mug of tea in my hand at a certain time in the morning, I used to be able to tell every car that was passing the road, and that. So anyways, just before the world collapses, mountains, rivers and lakes, acres, roods and perches into oblivion, drawn down into that fissure in creation, where everything is consumed in the raging tides and swells of non-being, the physical world gone down in flames, mountains, rivers and lakes, and pulling with it also all those human rhythms that bind us together and draw the world into a community, those daily rites and rhythms and rituals, upholding the world like solar bones, that rarefied amalgam of time and light whose extension through every minute of the day is visible from the moment I get up in the morning and stand at the kitchen window with a mug of tea in my hand, watching the first cars of the day passing on the road, every one of them known to me, name, number plate and destination, one after another, beginning at 7:30 with Frances Dugan in a Green McGann, off to her job as a receptionist in the Clube Hotel. I went to school with her husband Philip, he's about to start chemo, and Sarah Moran going in the opposite direction to begin her 8 o'clock shift in Allergan, and Mark Ruddy in an 07 Pajero returning from the night shift in Baxter, and the school bus going back to collect the kids from the furthest end of the parish, and Martin Doe in the green post van, followed by Seamie Moran in the milk lorry, 7,000 litres of milk sloshing around in the tank behind his head, with Jimmy Lyons behind him in his blue Passat. In half an hour he would throw open the gates of the builder's yard on the Kilgever Road. So that 5 mornings a week I watched these early starters from the kitchen window with a mug of tea in my hand. And when I see Jimmy's Passat turn left onto the main road, I know that it's 7:30 and that I'd better get a move on if I'm going to make it to work on time. Knowing also that Marid has still got at least 40 minutes in bed yet, a thought which always pleased me, as if those moments were my gift to her each morning, a thought which often recalls to me the early years of our marriage, when Dara and Agnes were very young, and I would wake and get ready for work while the three of them were still asleep, in a house that had no sound but myself going about the first tasks of the day, washing and shaving and dressing and setting the table for their breakfast, mugs and bowls, putting on my boots and jacket, the peace and quiet of early morning making it my favourite part of the day, married and the children asleep, breathing in their separate rooms, a gentle flowing current which brought the house alive even in the darkest winter mornings. I leave it there, folks. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, Alice, very much.
I was messing with a wee tune there by a very fine musician and a tune writer and singer and songwriter, a man called Brian McNeill. He's from I think he's from Falkirk, I think, and he's from Scotland, anyways. And the following day, lo and behold, I checked the emails, and there was an email from Brian McNeill. So I took that to be some sort of a sign. And just out of sheer devilment, I just made a quick recording of this tune, and I sent it to him. And he asked me when I was going recording it. So mustn't have done too bad. I don't even have a name for this, actually. It's a nice little tune. If I was thinking correctly, I would have asked him the name of it anyway. But we'll just call it Brian McNeill's Waltz for today.
thank you, Seamie, for that lovely piece of music. It's going down really well here. Maeva Harris has commented how gorgeous it is. But yeah, it just works perfectly with the evening. And thank you, Mike McCormack, for reading from Solar Bones. That's somebody has commented it's one of their favourite parts. Who wrote that? Lauren commented how it was one of her favourite parts of the books, and it's definitely one of the parts that stuck out to me as well. But thank you all for such a lovely evening. Diane commented saying how much she enjoyed the evening, and thank you to everybody involved. Patricia says, beautiful reading, great conversation, thanks Mike and Alice. And Hazel OG says, great reading and music. So now we're going to start with our open mic. So we're looking for Blahin Ryan now. So Blahin, could you unmute yourself? I will put you on screen now.
Hi, I'm just going to read an extract from some novel writing that I'm doing for college at the minute, and the only context needed is that this scene takes place Halloween night, so I'll go ahead. White, light, dark, tongue numb, sweat, smell, stale, drink, slap of hair, wet. Did someone spilt it on me? Pulse, through my feet, my heart, thump, thump, chest, thump, in feet, hot face, burn, air, breathe air, strangers' shoulders, strangers' hands, face, and another eyes, auburn. When the nightclub closed, it was time to make the ritualistic pilgrimage to the takeaway. It was close and cheap, and the food was only edible when you were intoxicated. Stepping out into the night, I became aware of my body once again. Inside, under the ever-moving coloured lights, I could forget about this usual form. I could be streaks and waves and flashes of colour. I could disappear where the lights didn't touch my liquid gold skin. I was just the music that flowed through my body, an abstract surrealist painting. I was solid again. The street outside the takeaway was a fever dream. Vampires stumbling, drunk on blood, and laying themselves across benches for eternal rest. Witches teetered on high heels, linked arm in arm with pumpkins and Alice in Wonderlands. There were people doubled over and losing balance in fits of laughter. There were girls crying and being swarmed by other girls offering hugs and dabbing smudged makeup from keening eyes. There were figures hunched in shadows, regurgitating the night's poisons. It was as though cotton buds had been stuffed in my skull. My skin was tired and my eyes were heavy. The street lamps blinded like interrogation lights. Pain surged through my feet now that they were still enough and had time to think about how they felt. I slipped off my heels and my flimsy fairy wings and let them dangle by my side. The little garden fairy that's lost all her magic. I didn't notice Luke approach until he was planting himself next to me. He didn't say anything, he just looked at me. He was bleary-eyed and the drink had taken away his cheery mood from earlier. He was snake-like, perfectly still now, but I knew from experience he could strike at any moment. You've been ignoring me. His words took their time, tumbling from my ears to my woolly brain. I held his gaze momentarily. I saw the ghost of my own hand rest in the crevice between his jaw and ear. It moved swiftly down and its thumb caressed his chin and then his bottom lip. It made the acid in my stomach bubble, and I wanted to be sick. I walked on with no intention of playing into his game. I didn't need to explain myself, and I certainly didn't plan on apologizing. I was too tired, not the kind of tired that would be fixed with rest. I was at an end. I didn't care what he said next or what he did or what I did. As I stepped away from him, I felt his hand tighten around my upper arm before he yanked me back, threatening my balance. His grip pinched my skin. He maintained his hold on me as I resisted, which made his fingers tighten. No, I said quietly, leave me alone. My words were fragile, pathetic even. He wasn't used to this register. He scoffed and let go in such a way that he pushed me back. We both knew he couldn't get away with his temper out here in such a crowded place. Bitch, he spat as he walked away. Embarrassment was forming, but I was not sober enough yet to recognize it. Someone bumped past me. A tattered brown jacket repaired with yellow beige thread that reminded me of straw. A scarecrow, maybe. It wasn't a spectacular costume. It was only that I recognized it unmistakably. The artist. A flush of images came down on me. That coat. On the bus, walking through the shopping centre, behind me in line at grocery shops, I had seen that same coat. The hood was up, but it was slipping back. The head turned and the face of a man glanced sweepingly over the left shoulder. Auburn eyes and a horn, small and twisting from his temple. It was only a flash as his hands raised to pull the hood further down. Our eyes met. He knew. The air was biting. When the horned stranger saw me, he hastily walked away, putting an urgent distance between us. I kept my eyes focused on his dark shape as it dipped behind and swerved through small crowds of friends and couples littering the path. He took a sudden turn down a side street. It was well lit, so I took the risk. The instant I turned that corner, I felt an ache in my gut. I froze. I was sheltered from the cold, yet a shiver went up my spine so intense that it hurt. The figure had stopped. Now that it was still, I saw what appeared to be a thin man with dark coarse hair covering most of his face and jutting from his scalp like that of a wild animal. The stir of the main street dulled, like we had been dunked underwater. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Sorry, the sound has suddenly gone for me there, but I think I'm due to read next. So I'm going to go for it. This is an extract from a novel in progress, very much in progress, called Era E. I hope everybody can hear me. Maybe somebody could put just a note in the chat if you can hear. Okay, great. Sorry about that. So this is from Era E. At the end of the path, a mound. As I stared at it, I saw us climbing in. Through the narrow passage, our bodies blundering, bending through the bouldered crevice. But where wore the entrance? How many years since we were here? Scrambling and scrabbling and scraping our way through. I skirted the perimeter, grubbing at the earth, grasping at the greenery, groping, tunnelling, rooting. And then a little opening presented itself, a groove among the earthy clods, a slither between the tufts, and mine hands ferreted in, parting the daub in hurried clumps, to the elbow, to the shoulder, a nudge, a lunge, a whole body budge, inwards, downwards, crumpling, collapsing. And I fell into the ancient hole, home to pre-Christian bones and brittle megalithic dreams, a burial chamber where, hand on heart, she hid her truths, sealed and saved for the rainy day present of the future. Truths she had blurted onto the page, blurt, 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 for posterity, for humanity, perhaps. And in the dank chamber, I knew what to do. Sorry about the tractor. Ferret again in the immutable rock, rummage in the petrification, delve into the pure, dry dirt. There they were. Envelopes, large, thick envelopes, bound together with twine, delivered to mine eager palms like an egg, a capsule, a holy relic. I turned the bundle over and round. On it, a scrawl, which simply said, E. Perhaps E stands for enormity. Seeing my name on the envelope wore like wearing a new skin, wore like being myself, more than ever, returned to mine own self. Perhaps E stands for entrust. But I also felt illegal and illicit, entangled in subversion. Perhaps E stands for endangered. Fear drove me back quickly to the entrance of the mound. I hid a drone, a surveillance drone, though rhythms were distinct from cargo or passenger hovers. Were it looking for me? Even without mine chip, Dons could track mine location through thermal imaging, but not perhaps right there in the burial chamber, the mound yawning heavy over mine head, a rock and rubble and clotted loam canopy of protection, upholding its millennia-long promise of secrecy. When the drone had passed over, I ran back along the track to meet the high lane, and from there tumbled forwards towards the old carriage road. I needed to find a new hiding place for mine treasure, and quickly. Somewhere outside the perimeter of the agri-sector compound, but close enough that I could retrieve it easily on a less dangerous mission. As I came close to our compound entrance, I remembered the herding shelter only a couple of fields away. It wore a small stone shack with a tin roof built into the corner of a field, designed for sheltering livestock, way back when animal farming were a thing. Now disused, it would be a good hiding place as long as nesting swallows didn't wreck it with their clodding mess, or a roaming wild boar didn't pull at it with their bawdy snout and trample it into the mud. I hurried to the shelter and once there used a few crabbed stones to make a kind of pocket in the wall to sit the parcel into. That would have to do for the time being. Mine heart rate had quickened with this endeavour, and I stumbled, half running down the trickling ditch line back to the road. Just in time, the drone wore back and circling overhead.
That's fantastic, Joe. It's lovely to hear some really brand new and unique voices with the open mic. That's what I love about the open mic, when you get to hear these upcoming writers and just hearing what new writing is about. Our next writer is going to be Mark Leon, wherever he's ready. Or Mark Cannon.
A moment. This is a poem I've been working on for the third year portfolio, and it's called Pick Your Poison. Step up, oh boy, do we have the vice for you. Pick your poison, pick your spice. What will drive you till your next hit? Because once you start, you'll never quit. Mary Jane needs her Spider-Man to swing by. She's legal now, or does that dampen your high? Caffeine's only ever been seen as a supplement without the awful, awful societal judgment. Just think of the kick, the shakes, the thrill as you use it to skip your morning meal. Oh, mornings aren't your start. Ah, a night owl. I like this part. Adderall for those who can't slow down. Go around, 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 around. Oh, energy drinks is what you meant. Don't forget bull semen is a main component. It'll speed up your heartbeat, but don't fret. It won't hurt you. I wouldn't take that bet. Cigarettes, what to say. Sold in shops to this day. Makes you look cool. That's not for me to say. But how does lung cancer sound before your 40th birthday? The smoke goes in, the smoke goes out, damaging your lungs with every cloud. But hey, it doesn't make you aggro, sad, or deranged. That's what alcohol's for, and it has center stage. So many choices, yet they all taste bad. Oh, reliable has never been a fad, but God, the fun really goes when it's legal. People claim it's precious, like Smeagol. But don't worry, it'll grow on you in time. But remember, public intoxication is a crime. But don't you dare think of driving, because we know the car will be sliding right before you crash. Because alcoholism is a constant itch, just like a bad rash. Oh, an escape is what you meant. Well, then I recommend LSD for you, my friend. It really brings out the color like no other as you let go of your senses and stress. Oh my God, look, it's a princess. But remember, the come down isn't that fun. Most left feeling empty or numb. Oh, you want to be happy? I'm sorry, my friend, but you won't be. Picking a poison isn't meant to be fun. This is your fate, how you will succumb. But hey, come on, it's not all that bad. Some of these may let you live just long enough for you to see your son become a dad.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Another very unique voice, and three very unique voices this evening. So it's great to hear these up and coming writers. And can't wait to hear from more next time. So that's the end of our November's episode of The Word. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch it back, it's available on our Facebook page, or you can watch it back from our YouTube channel, along with other previous episodes from this year and last year. So we're going to have our final piece of music with Seamie O'Dowd. And before we go, I'd just like to thank Mike McCormack, Alice Lyons and Seamie O'Dowd and Studio Row for supporting us technically for this evening. And thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye.
I'm going to finish off with this song. It's a kind of an adjustment of what do you call an adjustment of a song called the Galway Shawl. You recognise it? It sort of came up somewhere between myself, Rick Epping, and Johnny Ringo McDonough, to do a blues version of this somewhere along the line. And it's kind of developed from that, really. And before we go, just like to thank Sligo County Library and Michelle Brennan for asking me to take part in this event, and it's great to be part of it. And thank and wish the best to Mike McCormack as well for all the best with his work. And a little song called the Galway Shawl.
County Galway, one pleasant evening in the month of May, I spied a dancer. She was young and handsome, and her beauty fairly took my breath away. She wore no jewels, no costly diamond, no paint nor powder, no none at all. But she wore a bonnet with a ribbon on it, and around her shoulder was a Galway shawl. We kept on walking, and we kept on talking, till her father's cottage came into view. And she said, come in, sir, and meet my father, play for him, please, the foggy June. Well, I paid the blackbird and the stack of barley, played Rodney's glory and the foggy June, and she sang each note like an Irish linnet, while the tears they stood in her eyes of blue. She wore no jewels, no costly diamonds, no paint nor powder, no none at all. But she wore a bonnet with a ribbon on it, and around her shoulders was the Galway shawl. Oh, yeah. In the morning, as I was leaving, and I hit the road for old Donegal, and she said goodbye, sir, and she smiled and kissed me, and me heart did lay with that Galway shawl. She wore no jewels, no costly diamonds, no paint nor powder, no none at all. But she wore a bonnet with a ribbon on it, and around her shoulders was a Galway shawl. Around her shoulders was a Galway shawl. Around her shoulders was a Galway shawl.
Thank you very much.